Snow fell like tiny pieces of glass cutting through the cold wind as it blew across the dead plains of Veltrana. The sky was dark, always dark here. The sun never rose fully on this frozen world. Still, Sakara walked forward, one shaky step at a time. She was thin, her forearms trembling from cold and hunger. Her legs, once strong, now moved slowly. She held a small bundle close to her chest, her baby, Tali. The baby made soft noises, weak but alive. Sakara pulled the child closer, trying to share what little warmth she had left. Her skin was covered in short, dark fuzz like most of the Thrinari, an insect-like species with eyes made for dim light. But even her body, made for cold, was losing its strength. She wore only rags now. Her clothes had been torn and burned during her escape. The raiders had come 2 nights ago. Not humans, but other aliens. Tall, red-eyed beasts with fire weapons. They attacked her village without warning. She had run with only her child, hiding in caves, feeding on frost roots, and melting snow with her breath. But now, the cave was behind her, and the storm was stronger than ever. The wind screamed in her ears, snow piled on her shoulders. The baby shivered, crying softly. She knew what she had to do. Sakara stopped walking. She found a small hollow under a dead tree. The wind didn't hit as hard there. She crouched and carefully unwrapped the thin cloth from her baby. Then with slow fingers she pulled off the last piece of warm clothing on her own back, a thick belt of layered hide, and tore it into strips. With shaking hands, she stacked twigs and dry bark she had collected earlier. She made a small pile. Then she took one of the stones she had kept hidden in her pouch, Sparkstone, and struck it against metal from a broken spoon she carried. Spark. Once, twice, 3 times. On the 4th try, a tiny flame caught. She leaned close, blowing gently, eyes full of tears. The flame grew. Smoke rose into the frozen air. She fed the fire with her last piece of cloth. It burned quickly, but the warmth spread fast. She placed Tali beside the fire, shielding him with her arms. Her baby stopped crying and fell into sleep. Sakara smiled faintly. She didn't care about her own cold anymore. She just watched the little one's face peaceful in the glow of the fire. But inside, her heart ached. She had no more food, no more cloth, no tools, no weapons. She would not survive another night like this. "Sleep, my child," she whispered in her language. "Even if I go, you must live." Then she heard it. A distant rumble in the sky. At first she thought it was thunder, but thunder did not roar in steady lines like that. She looked up, blinking against the snow. A light streaked across the dark clouds. Blue and fast, like a comet. But this comet, it changed direction. Sakara stood slowly, shielding her eyes. The flying object was large. It burned as it came, down, falling fast toward the earth. She watched, her mind frozen with shock. Then it crashed. Far off, across the white hills, a sound like mountains breaking shook the ground. A red glow appeared over the horizon for just a moment, then faded. Her people had told stories of sky gods and machines that flew among stars. She had never seen one until now. Her kind had no ships, no machines. But the thing that had just fallen, it was not from this world. She looked down at her baby, then at the fire now slowly dying. The crash could be danger, but it could also mean help, food, shelter, even rescue or death. Still, sitting here would mean only one thing. The cold would win. She wrapped her baby again and tied him to her chest. Her own skin burned from frost, but she did not stop. She stood, one hand on the frozen bark, and looked toward the smoke in the sky. She would go to the fallen star, because she had nothing left to lose. And maybe, just maybe, that star had brought hope. Sakara moved slowly through the snow, following, the smoke trail rising in the sky. The wind was sharp, but she did not stop. Her baby, Tali, was tied close to her chest, wrapped in soft leaves and thin cloth. He was quiet now, breathing gently. The land was cold and empty. No trees, no shelter, just white hills and broken ice. Still, Zakara kept walking, her feet frozen, her legs shaking. She had seen something fall from the sky, something not of her world. That meant danger. Or hope. After 2 long hours, she reached the edge of a deep crater. She stayed low, hiding behind a snow-covered rock. Below her, at the bottom of the crater, was a strange silver object. Large, broken, and still, smoking. It looked like a flying animal made of metal. Parts of it were glowing red. One side was open like a cracked shell. Black marks covered its body, and fire still burned at the edges. Zakara's heart pounded. This was a sky machine. She waited, eyes wide, listening for sounds. Was something inside? Then she saw movement. A shape, tall, 2-legged, came out from the wreck. It wore a dark suit that covered its body with a round helmet over its head. Its arms and legs moved slowly like it was hurt. It held a long tool in one hand. Sparks jumped from its back. Zakara stayed still. The stories told by her tribe said creatures from the stars were not to be trusted. Some helped, most destroyed. But this one looked weak, lost. It stumbled and fell to one knee. Snow covered its shoulders. Zakara waited longer. The creature tried to stand, then fell again. Its hand touched its side. Red fluid, thick like blood, leaked from under its suit. It was hurt. Her baby stirred, letting out a soft cry. The creature turned its head toward the sound. Zakara froze. It looked up, and though she couldn't see its eyes through the helmet, she felt its gaze. It didn't raise its weapon. Instead, it just stayed on the ground, breathing hard. The baby cried again. Zakara looked down at Tali, then at the wounded creature. She had a choice, run away and stay hidden, or go closer and risk everything. She took a deep breath and stepped out from behind the rock. The creature watched her but didn't move. She walked slowly down into the crater, her steps careful. She showed her hands, open, empty. She kept her eyes on the stranger. When she reached him, he tried to sit up straighter. "Please," he said in a soft, strange voice. His language was not hers, but the sound was not angry. He held out a small, blinking device. Emergency beacon. Broken. She looked at the machine in his hand, then at his helmet. She pointed at his wound, and he gave a weak nod. Zakara lowered herself to the ground beside him. Her fingers shook as she reached toward his side. She gently pressed the area around the blood. The creature flinched but did not push her away. She used a piece of cloth from her own wrap to press against the wound. He nodded slowly, whispering something again. Maybe a thank you. Then, the baby cried louder. The creature turned its head. He looked at the small bundle on her chest. Zakara stepped back slightly, protective. But the creature only stared, then smiled, a slow, tired smile. He touched his own chest with one hand and said, "Elias." Zakara looked at him, confused. He touched his chest again. "Elias," he repeated. "Ah, his name." She pointed at herself. "Zakara," she said. He nodded. She touched the baby gently. "Tali," he repeated. "Tali," his voice soft. For a moment there was silence between them. Only the wind spoke. But something had changed. The fear began to fade. Elias moved slowly and opened a pouch on his suit. He pulled out a small packet and tore. Then a warm smell filled the air. Food. He handed it to her. Zakara took it with careful hands. She smelled it. It was soft, rich, unlike anything she had tasted. She gave a small bite to Tali, then one to herself. Warmth spread through her. Elias watched with calm eyes. He gave another packet, then closed his eyes, leaning back against the metal wreck. Zakara looked around the crater. The storm was growing. stronger again. She had to build shelter. But now, for the first time in many days, she was not alone. She looked at Elias, this strange being from the sky, and felt a strange feeling rise in her chest. Hope. Night was falling again on the frozen world of Veltrana. The sky grew darker, and the wind began to howl like a wild animal. Snow flew across the broken land like dust in a storm. But deep inside the crater, where the strange ship had fallen, a small light still burned. Zakara sat beside the wreckage, holding her baby Tali in her arms. The little one was sleeping, his small chest rising and falling gently. Beside her, the human named Elias was lying down, resting his back against a metal wall. His suit was damaged, and blood had dried around the cloth she had pressed to his side. He was weak, but alive. Zakara had helped him as much as she could. She had cleaned the wound with melted snow and used strong thread from her own wrap to tie the cloth tight. She had also built a small shelter by using metal panels from the ship and snow to block the wind. Inside, it was warmer, just enough to survive. Now the fire she had made from bits of broken wiring and insulation was slowly burning. The flames gave off a strange smell, but they made heat. That was all that mattered. Elias opened his eyes and looked at her. His voice was soft. "Thank you." Zakara did not know the words, but his tone was kind. She gave him a small nod. He reached into his suit again and pulled out a square box. With a few clicks, he opened it. Inside were small packs, each filled with food paste and heating powder. He gave her one and showed her how to press the corner. The pack grew warm in her hands. Zakara looked at the strange food. Then she gave a little bit to Tali and tasted some herself. It was soft, sweet, and filled her with strength. Her eyes watered. She had not eaten something this rich in many days. Elias smiled. He pointed at the pack. "Human rations." She tilted, her head. "Who, man?" she asked slowly. He touched his chest. "Human." Then he pointed at her gently. "You, Thranari?" Skara nodded. She touched her chest. "Skara, Thranari." They shared a moment of understanding. Different species, different worlds, but the same struggle to live. Elias looked at the fire, then at the sleeping baby. "He yours?" he asked, using a soft tone. Zakara smiled gently. "Tali, my son." She cradled the baby close. Elias leaned back, tired, but his eyes were full of peace. "Strong, mother," he said. Very strong. Though she didn't understand the words fully, Zakara could feel their meaning. She looked away quickly, hiding her face as emotion rose inside her. Suddenly, a loud crack came from outside the crater. Zakara jumped to her feet. Elias sat up, groaning in pain. The sound came again, closer this time, like ice breaking or heavy steps in the snow. Zakara grabbed a sharp piece of metal from the wreckage. She stood in front of the shelter, shielding Tali with her body. Elias reached for something near him. A long tool, maybe a weapon. He held it tight but weakly. Then, from the darkness above the crater wall, a shape appeared. It was tall, with glowing yellow eyes and thick fur. A frost beast, a wild creature of Veltrana, strong, hungry, and deadly. It sniffed the air and growled low. Zakara's heart pounded. She had no real weapon, only sharp junk and weak hands. Elias raised his tool and pointed it at the creature. He pressed a button. Nothing happened. The weapon sparked, broken. The frost beast climbed down slowly, step by step. Its mouth opened, showing sharp white teeth. Zakara turned her head slightly. "Stay," she whispered to Elias and the baby. Then she stepped forward. She raised the sharp metal, her hands shaking. The beast growled louder. It rushed toward her. Just before it reached her, Elias shouted. He threw a broken metal plate at her. The beast. It hit its side, The creature turned, distracted. Zakara used that moment. She lunged forward and drove the sharp metal into the beast's shoulder. The creature howled in pain and struck her with its paw. She fell to the ground, coughing, but the wound was deep. Elias crawled forward, using the last of his strength. He grabbed a pipe and slammed it into the beast's leg. Together they fought the monster with nothing but broken tools and courage. At last the beast gave one final cry and limped away, bleeding into the snow. Zakara sat on the ground, breathing hard. Elias collapsed beside her, exhausted. They looked at each other, not speaking. They had fought as one. Not as Thranari and human, but as two survivors. Zakara touched the bruise on her arm. It hurt, but she was alive. So was Tali. She looked at Elias and gave him a small smile. "Thank you," she said, repeating his word from earlier. Elias gave a tired grin. "Together," he whispered. Zakara nodded. "Yes, together." The cold night pressed down on the crater, like a heavy stone. The fire burned low, its light flickering against the metal walls of the broken ship. Outside, the wind whispered secrets through the icy hills. Zakara sat close to the fire, her baby Tali safe in her arms. Elias was still resting but awake, watching her carefully. The danger had not passed. Veltrana was full of threats, and the frost beasts were only one of many. Suddenly, from the darkness beyond the crater's edge, a soft sound came. Something moved through the snow, fast and quiet. Zakara's sharp eyes caught the movement. A group of creatures, four-legged and covered in white fur with glowing eyes like stars. They were frost wolves, hunters of the frozen plains. Zakara's body tensed. These wolves were dangerous. They moved as a pack, smart and fierce, and their hunger was strong. Elias noticed too. He rose slowly and searched the wreckage. His hand found a long metal rod, a broken antenna piece. It was not a real weapon, but it could help. Zakara stood and found a sharp piece of broken glass. She held it tightly, her small arms shaking but steady. The wolves circled the crater, eyes never leaving the light of the fire. Their breath showed in the cold air, white and misty. Zakara whispered to Elias, "They want the fire." He nodded. "They want us." The biggest wolf stepped forward, growling low. It moved closer, smelling the warmth and life inside the crater. Zakara felt Tali stir in her arms. The baby was cold and tired, but he needed safety. The wolves advanced slowly, testing their chance. Elias took a deep breath and stepped out of the shelter. "Stay behind me," he said. Zakara did not hesitate. She stood beside him, ready to fight. The wolves stopped for a moment, sensing the new threat. Elias swung the metal rod at the first wolf. The wolf jumped back, surprised by the noise and movement. The others growled louder. Zakara threw her sharp glass shard at a second wolf. It hit the creature's side, making it yelp. The wolves snarled and charged together. Elias met the first wolf head-on, blocking with the metal rod. The beast lunged, teeth flashing. Elias pushed it back, but his strength was not enough. Zakara fought beside him. She slashed with her shard, cutting fur and skin. The wolves were strong, but she was faster and clever. The fight was fierce. Snow flew, firelight danced on teeth and claws. Tali cried softly inside her wrap. Elias was hit on the arm, blood staining his suit. He gritted his teeth and pushed harder. Zakara felt a sharp pain on her leg but did not stop. Together they fought the wolves, using every move, every chance. At last the pack retreated, leaving behind heavy footprints and growls. Zakara and Elias stood breathing hard, hurt but alive. Elias looked at her and smiled weakly. "You are brave." She smiled back, touching her baby's head gently. "So, are you?" The night was still cold and dark, but inside the crater a small fire burned brighter. It was the fire of two survivors fighting together, and for the first time Zakara felt something new. Not fear, but hope. The cold had not left Veltrana, but inside the small shelter made from metal and snow, Zakara and Elias felt a little warmer. The fire crackled softly as they sat close together, sharing the last of the strange human food. Tali, the baby, was asleep again, wrapped safely in soft cloths. His small face was peaceful. Zakara smiled quietly as she watched him. For the first time since the storm had taken her home, she felt a small spark of hope. Elias was working on something near the broken ship. His hands moved carefully over pieces of metal and wires. The glow from his small tool lit his focused face. "What are you doing?" Zakara asked, her voice soft. Elias looked up and smiled tiredly. "Trying to fix a signal device," he said. "I need to send a message for help." Zakara nodded. "Message?" she repeated. He picked up a small box with blinking lights. "Yes. It sends words through the stars. Other humans will hear and come to find us." Zakara looked out at the dark sky. The stars were small and cold like faraway fires. She had never dreamed she would see them so clearly. "Will they come?" she asked quietly. Elias met her eyes. "They will try, but it takes time." She understood. Time was the hardest thing to find here. For hours, Elias worked with wires and broken parts. Zakara sat beside him, watching. She didn't understand the human tools, but she saw his hope. That hope gave her strength. Sometimes Elias looked at Tali and smiled. "Strong boy," he said. Zakara felt a warm feeling inside. She touched Tali's tiny hand and whispered, "You must live." The night grew deeper. Outside, the wind sang its cold song, but inside the shelter the fire flickered and the signal device blinked. Suddenly the device made a soft, strange sound, a beep. Elias's eyes lit up. "It works," he said. Zakara smiled. "You are clever," she said. Elias laughed softly. Humans are good at fixing things. They talked slowly, trying to share words. Elias showed pictures on a small screen. Blue, oceans, tall cities, green forests. Zakara watched with wonder. Her world was frozen and silent, but his was full of life. She told him about the Thranari tribe, their customs, and the starless nights they feared. Though their languages were different, they found a way to connect. As the fire burned low, Elias stood and looked toward the dark horizon. "We must wait," he said. Zakara nodded, her eyes tired but hopeful. Suddenly, from outside the shelter, a faint sound came, a soft rhythmic tapping. Zakara and Elias froze. They looked at each other. Was it friend or danger? Slowly, Zakara moved to the entrance. She looked out into the snow. A small shape appeared, another human. A search party, perhaps. Zakara felt her heart race. Elias stepped forward and called out in his language. The figure answered, and soon more voices came. Warmth and light entered the crater. Zakara smiled and lifted Tali. For the first time in many days, she felt safe. The search team arrived at the crater with careful steps. The cold was sharp, but the lights from their suits and machines cut through the darkness. The leader, a tall human named Captain Lorne, looked down at the shelter where Zakara sat, holding her baby Tali close. Elias stood beside her, his arm in a sling but his eyes bright with relief. The rescue was finally here. Captain Lorne studied Zakara carefully. She was unlike anyone he had ever seen. Her skin was dark and covered with fine hair. Her eyes were wide and full of fear and hope. The baby in her arms was small and fragile. "Are you hurt?" Lorne asked, his voice calm but firm. Zakara nodded slightly but said nothing. She did not speak the human language well. Elias stepped forward. "She saved my life. We survived together." Lorne's eyes narrowed. "This is a dangerous planet. We cannot take risks." Zakara felt a cold fear inside. She looked at Tali, then at Elias. What would happen to them? The soldiers began to scan the area, checking for threats. Machines beeped and whirred. "Captain." Lorne spoke again, this time more firmly. "You cannot leave this planet with us. Elias's face tightened. She comes with me. I am responsible. Lorne shook his head. Orders are clear. No alien passengers. Zakara's heart pounded. She did not understand everything, but she knew this was a moment of choice. Elias turned to her. Zakara, you must decide. Stay here alone or come with us. Zakara looked at the cold, empty land. She thought of her lost tribe, the hard life, the endless cold. Then she looked at Elias, who had helped her, and the small light in the soldiers' machines. She made her choice. I go, she said softly. Tali stirred, and she tightened her arms around him. The soldiers watched as Elias helped Zakara to her feet. They moved carefully toward the dropship waiting nearby. The cold wind whipped at their backs. Captain Lorne followed, eyes still cautious. As they climbed into the warm ship, Zakara took one last look at Veltrana. The frozen world. That had been her home, her prison, and almost her end. Now she was leaving it behind, not as a lost mother, but as one who had fought and survived. Elias helped her settle beside Tali and promised her safety. The dropship lifted off, rising above the ice and snow, toward the stars. Zakara whispered to her baby, Hope, the dropship hummed softly as it soared through the dark sky of Veltrana, rising higher and higher until the frozen world below became a distant white circle. Inside, the warmth of the ship was a comfort unlike any Zakara had known in a long time. The cold, the hunger, the fear, all seemed far away now. Zakara held her baby Tali close. His small fingers curled around hers. The baby's eyes fluttered, open, taking in the strange new light around them. For the first time, Tali saw the stars, not as cold points of light, but as signs of a future. Elias sat nearby, watching them quietly. His injury had been treated quickly by the ship's medics, and he was already planning their next steps. But for now, the most important thing was that Zakara and her son were safe. The ship's halls were bright and filled with sounds of many species, humans, Threnari, and others. Zakara had never been among so many different beings before. At first she felt nervous, but the kindness in their eyes soon made her feel less alone. As the ship moved through space, it reached its destination, a large Terran colony ship named New Dawn. It was a place of hope, where many species lived together and learned from one another. Zakara stepped onto the colony ship for the first time, her heart pounding. She saw gardens filled with green plants from different worlds, strange machines that hummed softly, and children playing, all different shapes, sizes, and colors. One small human child ran toward her with a smile. Hello, the child said. Zakara smiled back, unsure of the words but happy for the warmth. Elias introduced her to the colony's caretakers, who helped her find new clothes, soft and warm, but very different from the rags she had burned to save Tali. She looked at the smooth fabric, amazed. It was like a gift. Days passed. Zakara learned the human language better, helped care for her son, and shared stories of her tribe. She told Elias about her life on Veltrana, the cold nights and the strength it took to survive. Elias listened, sometimes quietly, sometimes with wonder. He showed her more about humans and their ships, the stars they traveled, and the hope they held for peace. One evening, as the colony's twin suns set behind glass walls, Zakara stood on a balcony overlooking space. The stars stretched endlessly before her, bright, alive, and welcoming. She held Tali close and whispered softly, Hope. Elias joined her, placing a hand on her shoulder. You are not alone anymore, he said. We will protect you. Together, we are stronger. Zakara looked at him, a smile growing on her lips. For the first time, she felt truly safe, truly part of something greater. The fire she had burned on Veltrana had been a last hope in the cold. Now, in the warmth of the colony, a new flame burned inside her heart, a flame of trust, friendship, and the promise of a better future. And as the stars shone brightly above, Zakara knew one thing for certain. No matter how dark the night, humans and Threnari alike could find hope together.